kind of in on the idea of the Kings making a play for Jrue Holiday.
This is a tough one because the way that the Kings play is not really the way that Jrue is built to play.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have to play off ball, which he's played off ball a ton. I mean, I think there's something interesting that happened last year that a lot of people missed. Like if you don't watch the Milwaukee Bucks all the time, there was something that I hadn't noticed in previous years, but it was that Chris Middleton really, really stepped up as a passer. And so usually you have, Giannis at 5.7 assists per game. Chris Middleton last year, 4.9 assists per game. So, like, while he wasn't the same shooter and scorer that he had been in the past, all of a sudden he started, he's a really good passer. Although I'm wrong, 4.9, 5.4 the previous 2 years. He's like a really good playmaker. So Jrue has had to play off ball quite a bit, but he's still a guy that needs the ball in his hands for certain, number of touches. I think losing the only way to get a deal done, and I'm not saying the Kings are doing this or anything else. The only way to get a deal done is to wait until after December 15th when you start to get some of your players that you signed this offseason where you have the right to trade them. And then Harrison Barnes can't be traded until December, I think it's 29th. Because he's an extension player, he has a slightly different like deadline than other players.
Mm.
But in order for the Kings to make a trade, again, I'm not saying this is what I would do, or it would cost you Kevin Huerter. It would cost you Davion Mitchell. I think the only way to do it would be Chris Duarte, and then you'd have to come up with one more player. And I still don't think the Kings can come up with the right combination of salaries to match what would go to Portland. And so it's very, very
That makes
difficult
sense.
because he's a player that makes like, what is it, $36.9 million. So $37 million for Jrue Holiday. You have to be within 125% one way or another. So if you take like 37 million times it by 0.75, you come up with the dollar figure at like 24, 26 million.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to build a package that would come up to that amount. And it's really, really difficult to do for the Kings without gutting
just obliterating your depth.
A lot of your depth.
Okay.
Right. And so it would be tough. Now, could the Kings do it? Yeah, because Jrue Holiday can play backup point guard.
Mm-hmm.
And you would still have Malik Monk and you would put him alongside De'Aaron Fox. And but it would weaken things in your backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you got later in the year, which I just don't think that that's what Portland's going to do.
No, they're going to flip him ASAP.
Yeah. So the Kings had this problem during the draft where they didn't have any players under contract, so they couldn't trade anyone. The only player they only had like their core under contract. So De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Malik Monk, Keegan Murray, Davion Mitchell,
mm-hmm.
and Kevin Huerter. That I think that was it. So when you have, Harrison Barnes or Trey Lyles not under contract,
mm-hmm.
you can't trade them. You can do sign and trade, but that's different than having a player and being able to just go and make a trade. So yeah, like really complicated. And so the Kings would have to bring in a third team. And then there would have to be a way for them like structurally to send out enough contract to make it work. And we're talking about a couple of days before the start of training camp. And so while I love the idea of Jrue Holiday, I do. I think
no doubt.
I've even compared him like he's the really, really amazing, awesome version of Eric Snow back when Allen Iverson's there.
I feel like he's like the Michael Jordan of Davion Mitchell's.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Like he's a star in his role, and he would be the Kings' third best player walking into the season, and maybe for the next 2 years, but there would come a point where someone else would step up.
So that's where I kind of land with Jrue Holiday, because I understand his value, and I understand that whatever team acquires him, it's going to be like either they are now a contender or they are even more of a contender.
Yes.
Maybe it's the Clippers, maybe it's Boston, maybe it's Memphis, Philly. I don't know. I'm just picking teams, right?
Yeah.
Miami. But on the other hand, because of that, and because I think that Portland's going to try and drive the bidding up as much as humanly possible, obviously. I think whatever team gets him, it's going to be like, that's a nice ad, but man, they paid a lot. Like they gave up a ton to get their now third or fourth best player. And Jrue
Yeah.
Holiday's really good. And it's tough because I don't want to act like I'm trying to undermine Jrue Holiday. But I think he's going to get like a star level trade package, and he's a, second or third tier guy.
Yeah, so again, like we've done this in the past where you look, and that's a key right there.
Defensively, he's elite.
Defensively, he's spectacular, and he would help change everything for the Kings. It's kind of like why I always bring up OG Anunoby. Defensively, he's just so good that he can change everything.
5 positions, yeah.
But if I look at the Kings and I, automatically De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis 1A, 1B, whatever you want to put them as far as like your star level or your, player option level. But then the Kings have a whole bunch of guys at this next tier, and it's Keegan, it's Harrison, it's Malik Monk, and Kevin Huerter. I think they're all in the same tier. If you added Jrue Holiday to this team, I believe Jrue Holiday is a slight step above that tier, at least for now, for a player like Keegan Murray. Like there's a possibility that Keegan Murray becomes much bigger and better in the future and becomes more of like the Chris Middleton, where Chris Middleton was the second best player on the championship team for Milwaukee, and Jrue Holiday was the third. But I still think that he has the potential to be like that, the third best player on your team. And in a worst case scenario, if Keegan continues to ascend, the fourth best player.
Do you know how many times Jrue Holiday has been an All-Star?
Once.
Twice.
Yeah. Once before he got traded from Philly, which was his silliest trade of all time.
Right, 2012-13. He made it, and then this last year he was an All-Star. I would have gotten that wrong. I would have said like 6 or 7.
No, I thought it was just a one time. I forgot he made it this year.
Also, over the last 3 years, he's shooting 49% from the floor, 39.5% from 3, and 80% from the free throw line.
Yeah,
man,
he is so efficient.
He's just a really good player, man. But also the other aspect of this is he turned 33 in June.
Okay, but
like he's gonna be nearing. If they make the finals, whatever team he's on, he's going to be like 34, turning 34 during the finals.
Yeah, so you would get him in the 33, 34 seasons. So like he'd play out most of the next season.
Yeah.
Well, he would play out the entirety of the next season at 34 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, but at the same time, it's really, really difficult, especially if you're not in the initial trade. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where it becomes, because if you're in a much bigger trade, then you can start using trade exceptions to go to one place. And like there are ways to massage the cap to make it happen. But in this situation, like you would have to do like a 4-for-1 to Portland. And it would be very difficult, and it would really gut what you're trying to do. And then you would be scrambling here. You would literally be trying to throw pieces together here at the last second to try to fill out the rest of the roster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. And that's where I understand there was somebody in the chat, Jimmy James, and in the YouTube chat was like, this is a trade you do. Jrue Holiday is a stud. Go get him.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
I don't disagree.
Right. But to your point, it probably means this isn't, they'll take salary filler and draft picks. Like, I don't.
Well, no, I think they would take salary filler and draft picks. I totally agree with that. The problem is the Kings don't have salary filler and draft picks. They have draft picks. They don't have the other.
Right. They don't have Rashawn Holmes that they can just throw into a deal and be like, hey, here's a bunch of money on an expiring.
That is the problem. The Kings aren't built.
That's what I meant.
That way. Right. And so it's a problem. Like would Portland consider taking on 3 years of Harrison Barnes? But the problem is you can't trade Harrison Barnes right now.
Right. Not till you said December 15th.
No, he's like December 29th, I believe.
Okay.
But like if you had Trey Lyles to make this deal work, but you don't have Trey Lyles' his contract until December 15th. And so you can't actually piece together a trade that I can see without throwing in like 2 or 3 minimum scale guys. So you could do like a Kessler Edwards and a Colby Jones, something like that, to start stacking up. But they're going to want draft capital on top of it. And what are the players you're sending out? Now, if I'm giving him a 25-year-old Kevin Herter and a 24-year-old Davion Mitchell, like those are pieces that can fit into what they're building right now. And so
Right.
they might make sense to them,
Hmm.
but the overall package is very difficult to assemble.
Yeah.
And again, it would cost, you'd have to throw Duarte in there. And again, maybe that's a piece, but you'd be scrapping everything that you'd planned on right now
Hmm.
for a totally different potential high-end payoff in the end.
Hmm.
But you would have to really look at your first 20 games of the season and reassess what you're going to do there, because it's not going to be easy to just like hit a switch and go.
It feels like they're on a track upward, and this would be moving on to a different, faster track with a pretty significant question mark in it.
Yeah, it would be like if you had like your whole soccer team in one little bus and you're driving down the road, and then you pulled over to the side of the road and said, "Hey, we're gonna have 5 of you get out right now and go with that other car, and we're gonna take one of their kids into our car, and then you guys are going to a different game." That's, like it's really difficult because it's been continuity,
That's it.
all
Right.
in on
Right.
this.
Right.
I think Jrue Holiday being available today versus Jrue Holiday to get available at the trade deadline
Hmm.
is two totally different conversations for the Sacramento Kings.